Breaking news tonight out of the Middle East. The U.S. strikes dozens of locations in Iraq and Syria in response to the fatal attack in Jordan, which killed 3 U.S. service members. One Baltimore man is charged with murder for the second time. Why this latest incident is raising questions about consequences for juvenile offenders. And Democrats' new crime plan could face some pushback from DJS. We pressed state leaders about how they plan to move forward.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 6.
Fox 45 News has breaking news out of the Middle East. The United States launches dozens of airstrikes on locations in Iraq and Syria. Now, those strikes come in response to a fatal drone strike in Jordan. That strike killed 3 U.S. service members. Today's initial airstrikes by the U.S. hit command and control headquarters, ammunition storage, and other facilities in Iraq and Syria. President Biden issued a statement after the strike saying military response will continue at times and places of his choosing, but that the United States does not want a conflict in the Middle East. The president also warned, if you harm an American, we will respond. The United States has warned for days that they would strike back at the militias responsible for the deaths of those U.S. service members. And according to the president, this is only the beginning of what he calls a tireless response or tiered response. Stay with Fox 45 News on the latest developments. In 15 minutes, retired Brigadier General John Teichert is joining us live to talk about today's airstrikes and what comes next. Mackenzie.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Mackenzie Frost. A Baltimore man has been charged with murder again. Fox 45 News has uncovered that a suspect who police just arrested in a double homicide has a prior murder-related conviction. Police say that suspect was a juvenile at the time. Fox 45's Alexa Ashwell has the details.
Lamonte Sherman was 17 years old when he was charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Fast forward to now, he's accused of murdering 2 men. This is the man, Lamonte Sherman, who investigators say shot and killed 2 men inside of a home on Greenmount Avenue in North Baltimore back in December 2023. The 28-year-old arrested just days ago. And now we're learning this is in fact not his first time facing murder charges. Fox 45 News uncovering when Sherman was 17 years old, he was convicted of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and a weapons charge.
The outcome is somewhat predictable, unfortunately, that some years later we have a person who's committed another horrific crime, and we can almost always trace it back to earlier contact with the criminal justice system.
Law enforcement expert Jason Johnson weighing in, saying it's unlikely at 17 conspiracy to commit first-degree murder was Sherman's first run-in with police or the judicial system. This leaving more questions about the handling of the then juvenile. That information protected. What the public can see. For the 2013 conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, Sherman was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but a judge suspending all but 5 years of that sentence, plus 3 years supervised probation. Court records go on to show in 2016, while in prison, Sherman was convicted of a weapons charge and sentenced to 1 year in prison. But Sherman still released by 2018.
It reiterates what I think the public is coming to understand is that, especially for juveniles in Maryland, there's very little accountability.
Fast forward to now, Sherman charged with the murders of 2 men.
For all the talk is wanting to have a system that both recognizes and treats young offenders differently than it treats adult offenders. That's also backed up with, but also protects the public safety. Protecting the public safety is the part that it really is lacking and hopefully will be addressed this session.
As for this latest case, Baltimore police believe the double homicide is domestic related. Sherman is being held without bond. Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Thanks, Alexa. The violence in Baltimore continued with multiple shootings overnight. Just after 12:30, a 39-year-old woman walked into a hospital with a gunshot wound. She was shot on Midwood Avenue in North Baltimore. Hours later, around 7 o'clock in the morning, a 25-year-old man was shot and killed on Coppin Court in South Baltimore. Anyone with information on either of those shootings is asked to contact Baltimore City Police. This week, top Democrats in Annapolis unveiled their long-awaited plan to curb juvenile crime in Maryland. It calls for some changes, like extending probation for certain offenses, but Department of Juvenile Services Secretary Vincent Schiraldi has indicated he doesn't believe in parole and probation. Today, we pressed state leaders on how this proposal would move forward. After a big week in Annapolis,
this is an important day.
The dust is settling following Governor Wes Moore and legislative leaders rolling out their plan to curb juvenile crime in Maryland.
We need to make sure that actions have consequences.
Part of the proposal, extending probation for young offenders. Democrats say it's to ensure juveniles have time to complete mandated programs to help them break the cycle of violence. But the leader of the Department of Juvenile Services, Vincent Schiraldi, put his views on display here in his latest book, Mass Supervision. The leader of Maryland's Juvenile Services calls for ending parole and probation, flying in the face of what leadership just announced in the State House. Friday.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone.
Senate President Bill Ferguson applauding the juvenile justice legislative package.
This has been a long time coming.
But one person was missing from the public rollout. DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi, and given his public comments about juveniles, often saying they aren't developed until early 20s and shouldn't be introduced to the adult criminal justice system, as well as his probation views displayed throughout his new book, we pressed the Senate president on if Schiraldi could be a roadblock to the Democrats' plan moving forward. Are you concerned that the Secretary of DJS may not be on board with the current policies or proposals being unveiled from the General Assembly?
We were there with the House Speaker and the governor. The governor is the chief executive. If he has confidence moving forward, I do too. He's the one that is charging his secretaries to implement the law. And so I think our job as the legislature is to hold everybody accountable.
Ferguson saying the people who can make these legislative proposals law appear to be on the same page. And that seems to be all that matters right now. But does it give you any pause that the Secretary of DJS seems to have a different opinion that flies in contrast to what we're hearing from you?
I don't know. At the end of the day, I think everybody's committed to diverting young people's behavior when they're off track. The question is how to get there and what is the most efficient means of achieving it.
Friday, we sent DJS a few questions asking, does Secretary Schiraldi support the proposal to expand the length of probation? What about the other aspects of the proposal? Why was he not in attendance for the news conference Wednesday? DJS giving us a statement not addressing any of our questions. We followed up asking if it's the right thing to do and it makes us safer, was referring to our question about supporting probation length. DJS telling us it was referring to the first part of their original statement, not telling the public if the Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services supports one of the main parts of the Democrats' plan. DJS also refusing to say why Secretary Schiraldi was not in attendance Wednesday.
Accountability is a great word, but if you're not accountable, the next word is who's going to be blamed.
Political analyst John Dede agrees with Ferguson that lawmakers will likely have the final say, and if Schiraldi doesn't agree,
if he can't get aboard with the program, he's going to be writing another resume.
Meanwhile, Senator Ferguson says he wants to see these proposals move forward quickly.
There's got to be an urgency to get there.
If that's the goal here, why not call for these plans to be implemented sooner?
I think a number of the parts of the package can be moving forward today. At the end of the day, it's the everyday execution of existing laws and the oversight of the existing system that is really going to have the biggest bang.
But both the House and the Senate versions of these plans would not take effect until October 1st if passed. The House and Senate are scheduled to hold hearings on these bills next week. Now, Fox 45 News investigates Schiraldi's track record and professional relationships. On Monday, we looked into his right-hand man, Mark Schindler. In the 6 months when Schindler served as interim director of juvenile corrections in Washington, D.C., he put reforms in place similar to the ones we have in Maryland now. Our investigation also uncovered several reports showing 10 juveniles who were already under supervision were arrested for murder. Another 7 were killed. On Tuesday, we told you about a Washington Times report on a lawsuit accusing a city official in Washington of checking a 16-year-old out of a juvenile facility while Vincent Schiraldi was the director of juvenile corrections. The lawsuit claims the official took the boy out of the youth center and improper activity took place, but the lawsuit was dismissed. Wednesday, we took a closer look at Schiraldi's relationship with Governor Wes Moore dating back more than 10 years. The governor's Robin Hood Foundation provided much of the funding for research into Schiraldi's book, leading one policy expert to question Schiraldi's influence on the governor's juvenile crime plans.
Very strange that he's almost writing a template for him and Wes Moore's plan at DJS. It's like they had it ready to go, or at least Vince Schiraldi did, and Wes Moore is helping him enact it.
Fox 45 News has been investigating Secretary Schiraldi and the Department of Juvenile Services for months. You can find our complete coverage online at foxbaltimore.com. After the break, more on today's military response in Iraq and Syria. We sit down with retired Brigadier General John Tigert to discuss if it could lead to a wider conflict in the Middle East.
We're going to talk about your weekend, but we're also going to talk about it's kind of an important day in the weather world. It's, of course, Groundhog Day. We heard what Punxsutawney Phil had to say. Now the question is, how accurate is Phil? Is he someone we can trust? Find out coming up.
We're following some breaking news tonight out of the Middle East. The U.S. military launching an air assault on dozens of sites in Iraq and Syria. Joining us now to talk about the strikes, retired U.S. Brigadier General and U.S. Senate candidate John Tigert. Today's air assault was a response to that fatal drone strike in Jordan, which killed 3 U.S. service members. What makes this response different from what we've seen from the Biden administration in the past?
Mackenzie, the key piece of the U.S. Central Command release after this attack is that we finally attacked something called the Quds Force, which is the special operations force that reports directly to the Ayatollah in Iran. And that means that these strikes in Iraq and Syria were actually against the Iranian regime. And that fundamentally makes it different and far more impressive in the minds of the Iranians to deter them than the things we've seen thus far in the last 4 months.
So President Biden has described his decision to strike these areas as a tiered response. Can you just explain a little bit about what that means and what might come next?
Mackenzie, I think it means that the Biden administration is not done with just these 8 locations and 85 targets that they attacked today. It means that other attacks may follow, either in Iraq or in Syria or in Yemen or the Red Sea or international waters, or potentially in Iran, though unlikely. But it just means that he, President Biden, intends to continue this campaign with military and possibly economic means to try to reestablish deterrence that he lost 4 months ago when he did not respond to the first attack.
So do you think that this creates the potential for wider conflict in the Middle East, especially if similar attacks continue?
Absolutely not. I think that our weakness has been causing a wider war to take place in the Middle East for the last 4 months. And the Iranians were going to keep going until they finally saw some strength, capability, will, and resolve from the Biden administration. The thing that's difficult is regaining deterrence is a lot more challenging than retaining it. And sadly, we lost it 3 years ago or maybe 4 months ago, and now we're going to struggle to get it back.
Really quickly, before I let you go, how soon do you think we could see the next strike if the president decides to strike again?
Mackenzie, there could be additional attacks tonight, Middle East time, but I think the president is very intentional about not limiting himself to the duration or timing of this tiered campaign. And so we should be watching for potential additional attacks and additional sanctions and other types of activities over the course of the next days.
Thank you so much for breaking it down and explaining all of this to us.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
President Biden's visit to Michigan yesterday exposed a growing divide between him and the sizable Arab American community there, even though the visit was meant to shore up support from the key swing state. His itinerary did not include talks with any Arab American leaders or the Democratic leaders in the state. Residents of Dearborn, Michigan staged a protest of the president's visit, outraged by his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. A handful of leaders in the state, members of his own party, said he needs to do more to protect innocent Palestinians in Gaza.
I think his policy people have got to spend time with this community and talk to the leaders.
Their concern, which I happen to share, is that U.S. policy has not been balanced in that sense.
The Middle East is the most volatile it's been in 50 years, and that's due in part because of this administration's decision making.
Biden won 64% of the Muslim vote in 2020, but according to the Arab American Institute, his support plunged to 17% in October when the conflict began. The White House maintains Israel has a right to defend itself, though Biden has urged Israel to change its approach to preserve civilian life.
All right, so it's a great weekend ahead of us here. The sun has now set. We're getting just a little last look of some of the cloud cover that's lingering behind, but you can see the clear sky behind it. It's going to clear out a lot tonight. 46 degrees. We're going to keep the north wind at around 10 miles per hour, so it's going to be a little brisk. If you're headed out this evening to go enjoy all the wonderful food that Baltimore has to offer, any other events, okay, light jacket easily. It's going to be kind of cold with all this happening, but going into the weekend, it will brighten up a lot. Radar satellite pictures showing that storm system moving away. We just had that little bit of rain this morning, and that was it. Now we're going to chill down a lot more. We're in the 40s right now. We're going to drop near freezing later on tonight with those north winds continuing to push the colder air across our area. More of that to come as we go into the weekend, but less clouds. That's the great news. So future scans showing us clearing out pretty much almost completely by around midnight. And we'll see those temperatures drop pretty swiftly, too. By 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, it's going to be at its rock bottom, near freezing, possibly in the upper 20s. And the sunshine will at least come out, and we'll have that all day long. Hardly any clouds in the sky, but it's only going to reach about the mid 40s or so. Maybe some upper 40s to around 50 degrees as we get into Sunday. So a few degrees warmer, but almost a carbon copy. Lots of sunshine to enjoy, and it's going to be a great, very wintry weekend ahead, but it's the good kind of winter weather. All right, colder air still lingering behind, and here's what we're tracking. One more storm system to pass to our south, not going to bring us any moisture there. Our next shot is not going to arrive until late next week. This one may be very dismal as far as rain is concerned, just not much from it. But then one behind that could be a little bit more, but we're seeing a lot of data inconsistency. One going back and forth. We'll have to let you know, but it's a stormier pattern likely still to set up next week. So here's the way your weekend is shaping up. Again, lots of sunshine, highs in the 40s to around 50 degrees by Sunday. We'll be back in just a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about Punxsutawney Phil and also have your 10-day forecast.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
That's hail falling across the Fresno, California region on Thursday. There was so much it almost looks like snow on the ground. It was all part of that atmospheric river that also brought floods and heavy snow. And when it was all over, a double end-to-end rainbow appeared in the sky. We end the week in Japan, where a majestic lenticular cloud appeared over Mount Fuji.
For more content like this, follow the National Weather Desk on Instagram.
Will we see an early spring? Punxsutawney Phil has the answer. We'll have an inside look at all of today's celebration in Gobbler's Knob. It's the day we've all been waiting for. Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil made his weather prediction this morning, and Mackenzie Jarrell from our sister station in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, caught all the action.
People traveled far and wide to Gobbler's Knob in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania to see and hear Punxsutawney Phil's weather prediction.
We're coming from Juvenile College to represent, almost 2 hours away.
Fox Chapel or Tupelo, Mississippi, who knows? One of the two.
One of the two. So how long was your travels here today?
About an hour and a half.
Will there be 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring? People we spoke with were divided on this.
I like to ski, so I hope 6 more weeks of winter, but
we disagree. No shadow. Hashtag no shadow.
After a long night of singing, dancing, and other fun, Punxsutawney Phil came out and shared his weather prediction.
But what this weather did not provide is a shadow or reason to hide. Glad tidings on this Groundhog Day, an early spring.
I was there the last couple of years. It's kind of fun out there. They have a blast. And, well, here's the thing. Is Punxsutawney Phil accurate? That's what I wanted to know, and that's what we looked into. Well, he claims 100% accuracy. That is a bold claim, Phil, but you know what? The National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration says you're only about 35 to 40% accurate. So the takeaway here is you should probably trust a degreed meteorologist to give you your forecasts, not just a rodent, but they just enjoy a good time out there. And man, do they know how to party in the middle of nowhere. That's pretty amazing. Your next 10 days looking pretty quiet. Nothing happened until Friday.
All right, Gerard, thanks. Finally tonight, if you hate the ice and snow, Havre de Grace is trying to change your mind. Meteorologist Amy Aronson has a preview of the annual Ice Festival.
Yeah, the Havre de Grace Ice Festival is coming up this weekend, and we are lucky enough to be with the ice god himself. I'm here with Jake Sabarito, who's telling us how all the magic happens. We're behind the scenes before the festival gets underway. There's a lot of prep that goes into this.
Yeah, we've been going at it nonstop for about 2.5 weeks now. We're just now finishing up today, so we'll be here until the late hours of the night, finishing everything up for Havre de Grace.
You've got a lot of ice going into this festival.
We do.
Blocks and blocks of it.
Tons of it.
And this process isn't a short one. So what goes into making a sculpture like we're seeing right here?
So it always starts with design. Kane Rose right here is actually our lead designer. He comes up with all of the designs that we use for our sculptures. That takes him about 2 or 3 hours per sculpture, and then it takes about 2 or 3 hours on our end just to carve it. We also use color in our sculptures as well. If we include that, all of our times double.
That is crazy. And this stuff isn't light. Ice weighs a lot. How much does something like this weigh?
This one that Kane's working on right now is probably close to 270 pounds. When we first start, they're about 300 pounds worth of ice.
Very cool, very cool. So come see it this weekend at the Havre de Grace Ice Festival.
Yeah, come check us out.
Yeah, come check it out. Here in Baltimore, Amy Aronson, Fox 45 News.
That looks so fun. That's all the time we have for Fox 45 News at 6. Family Feud is next, and we'll see you back here at 10.